Assessing the impact of international conservation aid on deforestation in sub-Saharan Africa. In Africa, conservation donors have spent more than $3 billion to protect biodiversity and stem tropical deforestation since the early 1990s. Despite more than 2 decades, however, there's little research on the effect of this aid at a region-wide scale. Numerous case studies exist, but show mixed results. Existing research is usually based on community perception or focused on short-term donor objectives rather than specific conservation outcomes, like forest loss. Thus, the impact of billions of dollars of conservation aid on deforestation rates remains an open question. This article uses newly available global data to analyze the effect of international conservation aid on deforestation rates in 42 African countries between 2000 and 2013. In the paper, we first describe patterns of conservation aid across the continent. Here we can see that conservation aid spending is heavily weighted towards a few countries, led by Kenya, Uganda, Madagascar, and Tanzania. Most aid spending in sub-Saharan Africa is what we call mixed aid, that is, aid for integrated conservation and development projects. Here you can see that in most countries, the vast majority of aid, shown in orange, is allocated to these mixed conservation aid projects. We then assess the impact of aid on forest loss, with 1 to 5 year lags, in addition to other political and socioeconomic variables that may also affect deforestation. We find that conservation aid is associated with higher rates of forest loss after 1 or 2 year lags. Here we can see that countries with high levels of aid, such as those in East Africa, Southern Africa, and Madagascar, also witness high levels of forest loss. Central Africa, on the other hand, had lower aid during this time period and lower deforestation rates. A similar result holds for protected area extent, suggesting possible displacement of deforestation from protected areas. Rural population is the most consistent factor associated with forest loss, confirming previous studies of this driver. Generally speaking, countries of West and East Africa have higher rural populations and slightly higher deforestation rates, while countries of Central Africa have lower rural populations and lower deforestation rates. Other economic, political, and governance factors showed either mixed or insignificant results. We also looked at results within a subset of high forest cover countries. In these countries, governance quality interacts with conservation aid such that deforestation rates are reduced. Here, we can see the countries with higher governance scores in blue or small circles, while the poor governance countries show large white circles. Gabon, Cameroon, Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, and to a lesser extent Uganda stand out as possible success stories, where moderate levels of aid have corresponded with relatively low levels of forest loss. In conclusion, our results suggest that in heavily forested countries, development projects designed to support conservation work initially in conditions of good governance, but that conservation aid alone is insufficient to mitigate large deforestation drivers.